My parents sold my lake house to cover my sister's $150,000 wedding. They laughed, saying, "Thanks for the wedding gift." I smiled and told them to check their mail. Their faces froze when they saw. My family shattered my world. They stole the one thing that connected me to my past, my sanctuary, my future, all to fund my sister's outrageously extravagant wedding. The betrayal was so deep, so unfathomable, it felt like a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for air. I'm Audrey, 34, and that lake house, the one my grandpa Jack built with his own 2 hands, wasn't just property, it was everything to me. It was my calm in the storm, a promise of peace, and my most cherished possession. To discover my own parents had secretly sold it, forging my name, just to bankroll Hannah's lavish dreams, that crossed a line I never even knew existed. Our family had always operated with Hannah at the very top and me, well, somewhere near the bottom. But this was a whole new level of cruel. Grandpa Jack, he was the only one who truly saw me. While my parents were always caught up in Hannah's dramatics and demands, Grandpa Jack took me fishing, taught me how to fix things, and told me stories. He was a self-made carpenter, and that lake house, nestled on 3 acres of waterfront on Lake Winnipegosis in New Hampshire, was his masterpiece. It wasn't fancy by modern standards, a rustic, 3-bedroom cabin with a massive stone fireplace and windows that framed the most incredible views. But for me, it was perfect. That dock, stretching 20 feet into the cool water, was where I spent countless hours, my feet dangling, lost in thought. The boathouse held his old fishing boat and the canoe he taught me to paddle when I was just 7. Every single corner of that place hummed with memories, defining my childhood. When Grandpa Jack passed away 6 years ago, everyone just assumed the lake house would be divided, or sold off. But his will was crystal clear. To my granddaughter Audrey, who appreciates the value of hard work and solitude, I leave my lake house and all its contents, in the hope that she will find the same peace there that I did. I can still see my parents' faces when the attorney read those words, pure, unadulterated shock. My mother recovered quickly, her smile a thin mask that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How wonderful, Audrey. You always were Jack's favorite." But the tone, it dripped with the implication that I had somehow cheated. My father just looked disappointed, probably already calculating the lost income. Hannah, who was 27 then, didn't even try to hide her anger. "But that property is worth a fortune now. Why would he leave it all to Audrey? I spent just as much time there as she did." That was a flat-out lie. Hannah always found the lake house boring after a day or two, preferring to rush back to civilization for shopping and socializing. This moment was just one example in a lifelong pattern. Since childhood, Hannah was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets in her orbit. She was the pretty one, the social one, the one who always needed things. I was the responsible one, the self-sufficient one, the one who was just supposed to understand when resources went to Hannah instead. Hannah wanted ballet lessons. Money was found. I wanted to go to a summer architecture camp. I was told to save my babysitting money. Hannah crashed her first car 3 months after getting her license. Replaced. I needed college textbooks. I worked 2 jobs. Despite this crushing imbalance, I managed to build a successful career as an architect. I put myself through school, secured internships through sheer hard work, and now I own a small, respected firm. My parents acknowledged my success with mild surprise, as if they never expected me to accomplish anything without their direct help. Hannah, on the other hand, bounced from job to job, always finding excuses why each position was beneath her. A boutique, a real estate office, social media coordinator, none lasted more than 6 months. My parents subsidized her rent, paid off her credit cards multiple times, never questioning her choices. 3 years ago, Hannah met James, and my parents were ecstatic. He came from money, worked at his father's investment firm, and seemed capable of maintaining the lifestyle Hannah felt she deserved. What they conveniently ignored was that James shared Hannah's financial irresponsibility. He drove an expensive car, wore designer clothes, took Hannah on lavish vacations, but lived in an apartment he could barely afford and carried significant debt. When they announced their engagement last year, Hannah immediately started planning her dream wedding. Initial discussions were reasonable, but within weeks, her vision exploded. 100 guests became 300. A local country club was replaced by an exclusive resort. A simple white dress became a custom designer gown. I was genuinely happy for her, I really was. I offered to help with planning, even suggested the lake house for a rehearsal dinner or photos. She brushed it off, saying it wasn't glamorous enough. I attributed it to her taste, never imagining the chilling truth. As the wedding planning escalated, my parents looked more and more stressed. My father, usually quick to boast, became vague about work. My mother developed a new habit of checking her phone whenever money came up. When I asked if they were worried about the costs, my father dismissed it with forced cheerfulness. Your sister only gets married once, he said, though we all knew that was statistically unlikely for Hannah. We want her day to be perfect. I offered to contribute a few thousand, even though it would strain my own budget. My mother almost accepted before my father cut in. That's very generous, Audrey, but unnecessary. We have it under control. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just couldn't fathom how far they would go. 6 months before the wedding, the subtle hints became impossible to ignore. Hannah's Instagram became a dizzying showcase of extravagance. A dress handcrafted in France. A photographer charging $15,000. Weekly updates on bespoke floral arrangements, custom invitations, monogrammed everything. During a Sunday dinner, I casually mentioned wanting to spend a long weekend at the lake house for maintenance. Oh, you don't need to bother, my mother said, too quickly. Your father hired someone to look after things. This was news to me. Really? Who? I've been working with Ted Johnson for years. Just someone new, my father mumbled, suddenly fascinated by his mashed potatoes. Ted retired. That was odd. I'd spoken to Ted 2 months ago, and he'd mentioned no such plans. I made a mental note to call him. The next day, his number went straight to voicemail. Again and again. I told myself he was busy, but a cold knot started forming in my stomach. Around the same time, I noticed my parents had removed several family photos from their living room, specifically, ones that featured the lake house. When I asked, my mother claimed they were being reframed. Then came the shopping spree. Hannah arrived at another family dinner wearing a diamond bracelet I'd never seen. Early wedding gift from Mom and Dad, she chirped, jangling it. The next week, she announced a 3-week honeymoon in Bali and the Maldives, staying in overwater bungalows. The week after that, a brand new BMW, replacing her perfectly functional car. Where is all this money coming from? I confided in my friend Sophia over coffee. Hannah's wedding has morphed into something out of a celebrity magazine, and now all these expensive gifts too. Sophia suggested James's family might be contributing. It made sense, until I ran into James at a restaurant. Audrey, just the person I wanted to see, he gushed, pulling me into an unexpected hug. I haven't had a chance to thank you properly. Thank me for what? I asked, utterly confused. For your incredibly generous contribution to the wedding, he beamed. Hannah told me how much it means to her. I stood there, dumbfounded. My contribution. James suddenly looked uncomfortable. You know what? I think I misunderstood something Hannah said. Never mind. I left with my takeout, a growing sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Then, the final domino fell. Dorothy Matthews, whose property bordered the lake house, called me. Audrey, dear, I wanted to check in about the sale. Will you still be coming up to visit occasionally? We'll miss seeing you around. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dorothy, what sale are you talking about? A long pause. Oh my. I think I've spoken out of turn. Perhaps you should talk to your parents. I pressed for more, but she suddenly remembered an appointment and hung up. I immediately tried the lake house landline. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Then, I checked my online banking. 3 failed attempts to access my primary savings account, all from an unfamiliar IP address. At this point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was terribly wrong. My parents were deliberately lying. I took a day off work and drove to the lake house. The 3-hour drive from Boston gave me plenty of time to imagine the worst. Maybe they'd rented it out illegally. Maybe they'd borrowed against it without authorization. The real worst-case scenario was too awful to contemplate. I tried to reassure myself. My name was on the deed, the taxes came from my account, Grandpa Jack's will was ironclad. Whatever was happening, it could be fixed. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road, I saw fresh tire tracks. The old wooden Whitaker's Rest sign was gone. Then, I saw it, a moving truck. My first thought, bizarrely, was that my parents had decided to surprise me with new furniture. But as I got closer, I saw people carrying things out of the house, not in. A middle-aged couple stood in the driveway, directing the movers. Neither was anyone I knew. I parked, trying to keep my voice steady. Excuse me, what's going on here? This is private property. The woman turned, a friendly smile on her face. Oh, hello there. Are you from the neighborhood? No, I said, my voice firm. This is my house. I'm Audrey Whitaker. This property belongs to me. The couple exchanged confused glances. The man stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm Robert Peterson, and this is my wife, Linda. There must be some mistake. We purchased this property 3 weeks ago. We closed on it last Friday. My legs nearly buckled. That's impossible. I never sold this house. There must be a misunderstanding. Robert looked genuinely concerned now. He walked to his car and retrieved a folder, handing it to me. Here are all the sale papers. We bought it from Thomas and Elizabeth Whitaker. Are they relatives of yours? My parents. My parents had sold my house without my knowledge or consent. I flipped through the documents with trembling hands, seeing their signatures on page after page. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold, my signature. A pathetic, clumsy imitation. This isn't my signature, I whispered, my voice barely there. I didn't sign these papers. I never agreed to sell this property. The Petersons looked horrified. We had no idea, Linda said. The sale went through a realtor, everything seemed legitimate. We've already sold our previous home. I handed the papers back, struggling to maintain composure. I'm sorry, but I need to speak with my attorney. This property was left to me by my grandfather. My parents had no right to sell it. I somehow managed to get back to my car before the tears erupted. I sat there, sobbing uncontrollably, staring at the home that had been mine yesterday, and now belonged to strangers. Through the windshield, I saw the Petersons, having an animated discussion, occasionally glancing my way with concerned expressions. After pulling myself together enough to drive, I headed straight to the county records office. The clerk was sympathetic, helping me locate the documents. Sure enough, there was a record of the sale, dated 3 weeks earlier. Sold for $375,000, which I knew was at least $175,000 below market value. A rushed, all-cash sale. As I was leaving, my phone rang. It was Dorothy Matthews. Audrey, I've been feeling terrible since our call. I think you should know what I overheard. I was at the general store about a month ago when your parents came in. They were talking about using the lake house money for Hannah's wedding. Your father specifically said they needed to take care of it before you found out. I assumed you had eventually agreed to the sale. I'm so sorry. I thanked her, asking for a written statement. She agreed. My next call was to my friend Stephanie, a real estate attorney. I explained everything, my voice breaking multiple times. They forged my signature, Steph. They sold my house to pay for Hannah's wedding. Jesus, Audrey, she breathed. That's not just unethical. That's criminal. Forgery, fraud, theft, you name it. You shouldn't be alone right now. Do you want me to meet you? We arranged to meet at her office. On the drive, another attempted access notification from my bank. It was as if discovering the house had ripped open my eyes to a whole pattern of deception. Stephanie reviewed the documents, confirming my worst fears. This is open and shut, Audrey. Your parents had no legal right to sell the property. The forged signature is clear fraud. We can get the sale reversed, though it will be messy and take some time. The poor buyers will have to be compensated. Then came the question that hit me like a physical blow. Do you want to pursue criminal charges against your parents? Did I want to see my own parents arrested? Despite everything, the answer was no. I wanted justice. I wanted my property back. But not that. I want to handle this carefully, I said finally. Hannah's wedding is in 3 weeks. I don't want to detonate this bomb before then. Stephanie looked skeptical. You're going to let them go through with the wedding, using your money, after what they did? I'd been asking myself the same thing. Part of me wanted to burn it all down immediately, call the police, expose everything. But a cold, strategic part of me suggested a different approach. If I confront them now, it'll be chaos. The focus will be on saving the wedding, not on what they did. Emotions will be running high, and I'll be the villain for ruining Hannah's special day. If I wait until after, there's nowhere to hide. The deed is done, literally and figuratively. Stephanie nodded slowly. That makes sense. So, what's the plan? We document everything. We prepare all the legal paperwork. We get statements. We build an airtight case. And then the day after the wedding, we deploy it, Stephanie finished, with grudging admiration. Cold. But fair. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my mother asking about wedding details and Hannah sending photos of floral arrangements. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. They were carrying on as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just committed a crime against me. I didn't respond to any messages, unsure I could maintain the facade of normalcy. That night, I barely slept, alternating between rage, grief, and disbelief. By morning, one thing was clear, I would get my lake house back, and my family would never be the same again. The engagement party was at the Langham, a 5-star hotel in Boston. I considered not attending, but that would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I arrived 20 minutes late, partly from anxiety, partly as a small act of rebellion. The ballroom was transformed with thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures. Hannah spotted me immediately, resplendent in a beaded white gown that could have passed for a wedding dress. Audrey. Finally. I was worried you wouldn't make it. Isn't this amazing? Wait until you see the cake. I hugged her stiffly, searching her face for any sign of guilt. All I saw was her usual self-absorbed excitement. It's certainly elaborate for an engagement party, I managed. Hannah waved dismissively. You only get engaged once. Well, to the right person, anyway, she giggled, as if her 2 previous broken engagements were charming quirks. Where are Mom and Dad? Over by the champagne fountain. They're talking to the wedding planner about adding fireworks to the reception. Can you believe it? Actual fireworks. I made my way across the room, stopping to greet family and friends. Everyone buzzed about the spectacular wedding plans, several people commenting on how generous my parents were being. Each compliment felt like a knife twisting. I finally spotted my parents, deep in conversation with a sharp-dressed woman, the wedding planner. I approached, close enough to overhear. The fireworks display will add $20,000 to the budget, the planner said. But the photos will be absolutely worth it. Plus, we've had a cancellation at the estate, so we can offer the premium garden space for the cocktail hour for only an additional $5,000. My father nodded, tension visible around his eyes. Hannah deserves the best. Let's add both. The planner beamed and walked away. My mother touched my father's arm. Are you sure, Tom? We're already so far over budget. It's fine, he said firmly. The house money covered the essentials. We can put the extras on the equity line. I felt physically ill. The house money. My house money. Before I could decide whether to confront them, Hannah clinked a spoon against her glass, calling for attention. She and James stood on a small platform. James and I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Hannah began, and we especially want to thank my amazing parents, who are making our dream wedding possible. The crowd applauded as my parents waved modestly. And a special thank you to my sister, Audrey, Hannah continued, finding me in the crowd, for her incredibly generous wedding gift. We couldn't have done any of this without you, sis. All eyes turned to me. I froze, unable to respond, as the room erupted in applause. James raised his glass in my direction. My parents both smiled broadly, raising their glasses too. Thanks for the wedding present, my father called out to appreciative laughter. I managed a tight smile and a slight nod, then immediately headed for the restroom. I locked myself in a stall, trying to control my breathing. They were publicly thanking me for a gift I never gave, for money stolen through fraud and forgery. The audacity was breathtaking. After splashing cold water on my face, I returned, determined to maintain composure. I needed to gather information, not create a scene. I circulated, accepting congratulations for my generosity with non-committal smiles. My Aunt Patricia cornered me by the dessert table. Audrey, darling, such sad news about selling the lake house. I know how much it meant to you, but what a wonderful sister you are to make such a sacrifice for Hannah's happiness. I nearly choked on my champagne. What exactly did you hear about the lake house, Aunt Patricia? Just that you decided to sell it to help fund the wedding. Your mother mentioned you were having second thoughts, but she assured me you came around to the idea. She said you realized you weren't using it enough to justify keeping it. Each word was another revelation of the narrative my parents had constructed. They weren't just thieves, they were actively working to control the story, painting me as a willing martyr. As I moved through the party, I saw evidence of the lake house money everywhere. The custom ice sculpture. The monogrammed crystal champagne flutes as party favors. Even the restrooms stocked with designer toiletries. I finally encountered my parents near the gift table. My mother embraced me warmly, as if nothing was wrong. Audrey, you look beautiful tonight. That blue really brings out your eyes. Thanks, Mom. Quite a party. Only the best for your sister, my father said, putting his arm around my shoulders. We're so proud of you both, you know. Hannah with her upcoming marriage, and you with your successful business. I wondered if he heard the irony. Hannah was being rewarded with a $150,000 wedding for finding someone to marry, while my years of hard work merited only a casual mention. The lake house sold quickly, I said, watching their faces carefully. My mother's smile faltered for a millisecond before she recovered. Oh, have you been up there recently? I met the new owners, I said, my voice neutral. The Petersons. They seem nice. My parents exchanged a quick, furtive glance. My father cleared his throat. Yes, well, property values in that area have really peaked. It was a good time to sell. Funny, I said, I don't remember putting it on the market. Another glance. My mother laughed nervously. Audrey, this is hardly the time or place for this discussion. We should focus on celebrating Hannah's engagement. You're right, I said, smiling faintly. We'll have plenty of time to discuss it later. I left shortly after, unable to stomach any more of the farce. In the Uber home, I called Stephanie, updating her on everything. They're gaslighting you now, she said. Creating a narrative where you agreed. This actually strengthens our case. It shows consciousness of guilt. They seem to think they'll get away with it, I said, staring out at the Boston skyline. They have no idea what's coming. The next morning, I met Stephanie to formalize our strategy. She'd already drafted a preliminary legal brief. Here's what we know, she said, pulling up a document. Your parents sold the property for $375,000. On June 5th, cash buyers, likely attracted by the below-market price. Your parents forged your signature on multiple documents, including the deed transfer. They appear to have accessed the funds immediately, evidenced by the timing of deposits and subsequent withdrawals for wedding expenses. How did they get away with this? I asked. Don't these documents require notarization? That's our next avenue, she said. Either they found a notary willing to overlook the forgery, or more likely, they forged the notary's signature too. We'll track down whoever supposedly notarized these. I rubbed my temples, a headache building. What about the buyers? The Petersons. They are innocent purchasers, but unfortunately, they don't have clear title. A forged deed cannot transfer ownership, no matter how innocent the buyer. The good news for them is they'll have recourse against your parents for fraud. The bad news for everyone is this will be messy. We spent the next hour outlining our approach. Stephanie would file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further financial transactions. She'd also prepare documents to report the forgery to the district attorney's office, though we'd hold off on filing those until after the wedding. We should also consult with a criminal attorney, Stephanie suggested. The DA may want to pursue charges regardless of your wishes. She connected me with Martin Clean. This is a clear case of fraud, forgery, and theft, Martin said after hearing the details. The DA could absolutely pursue charges, and with the evidence you have, conviction would be likely. Your parents could be looking at substantial fines and potentially jail time. The thought made my stomach churn. Is there any way to resolve this without criminal charges? Possibly, Martin said. If they immediately acknowledge what they did, return all the money and make restitution, the DA might be persuaded to accept a plea deal with probation. But that depends on many factors. Over the next week, I assembled a comprehensive file. Dorothy Matthews provided her written statement. I obtained bank records. Stephanie located the notary, who confirmed her stamp had been used fraudulently and provided an affidavit. Most damning of all, I found Hannah's online posts about wedding expenses that directly correlated with withdrawals from my parents' account after the lake house sale. In one post, she shared photos of her $15,000 dress. On the very same day, my parents withdrew that exact amount. What about the emotional impact? I asked Stephanie. I want them to understand what they've taken. It wasn't just property. It was my connection to my grandfather, my memories, my future. That's why I suggested the letter, Stephanie said. The legal documents handle the factual and financial. The letter is where you address the personal betrayal. I spent days drafting, revising, redrafting that letter. How do you express the feeling of having your own parents steal from you? How do you convey the depth of betrayal when the people who should protect you decide your inheritance is theirs to take? In the end, I kept it simple and direct. Mom and Dad, what you did was not just illegal. It was a profound betrayal of trust. The lake house was not just property to me. It was my connection to Grandpa Jack, who saw me when the rest of the family didn't. It was my sanctuary when life became overwhelming. It was my future, my plans, my dreams. You took that from me without asking. You forged my name. You lied to everyone, creating a fiction where I had consented. You spent the money on one day of celebration for Hannah, prioritizing her desires over my rightful inheritance. I am pursuing all legal avenues to reclaim what is mine. The attached documents outline the serious legal consequences of your actions. This could have been avoided with a simple conversation. Instead, you chose deception and theft. Hannah's wedding will proceed as planned. I will not punish her by disrupting her day, though I have serious questions about her knowledge of and complicity in this scheme. But once the wedding is over, there will be a reckoning. Audrey. As the wedding approached, maintaining the charade became almost unbearable. Hannah sent daily updates. My mother called repeatedly about bridesmaid dress fittings. My father emailed, asking if I was giving a toast. I responded with minimal engagement, pleading work commitments. I attended the necessary pre-wedding events, maintaining a detached politeness that several relatives commented on. You seem distant, Audrey. Is everything okay? My uncle asked at the rehearsal dinner. Just busy with work, I replied, with the smile I'd perfected over weeks, and a bit tired from all the wedding excitement. The night before the wedding, I could barely sleep. I reviewed the plan one final time: attend the wedding, maintain composure, allow Hannah her day. Then, the morning after, Stephanie would send the legal package via courier, and I would forward my letter via email. The reckoning would begin. As I finally drifted off, I thought of Grandpa Jack. Stand your ground, Audrey. Some things are worth fighting for. The wedding day dawned with perfect weather, as if even nature was conspiring to give Hannah her ideal day. The ceremony was at St. John's Episcopal Church, the reception at the Rosewood Estate, one of the most exclusive venues in the region. I arrived early for bridesmaid photos. Wearing the pale pink gown Hannah had chosen, I stood on the church steps, while the photographer arranged us. Hannah was radiant in her custom French gown, its 15-foot train and delicate beadwork having taken artisans hundreds of hours. Throughout the photo session, I maintained my composure by mentally cataloging the costs. Hannah's dress, $15,000. Bridal party hair and makeup, $3,000. Photographer/videographer, $15,000. Flowers for the church, $8,000. Each item, another piece of my stolen property. Another memory of the lake house converted into ephemeral wedding trappings. The ceremony was elaborate: string quartet, professional opera singer, custom vows. Hannah cried beautifully on cue, her makeup somehow flawless. James looked handsome and polished. My parents beamed from the front row, the proud architects of this perfect day. I performed my bridesmaid duties mechanically, holding Hannah's bouquet, adjusting her train, smiling for photos. Inside, I felt nothing but a cold determination to see this through. After the ceremony, guests were transported to the Rosewood Estate in a fleet of vintage Rolls-Royces. The estate was transformed with thousands of flowers, twinkling lights, elegant drapery. Cocktail hour featured a raw bar, caviar station, and a champagne fountain identical to the one from the engagement party. I circulated, accepting congratulations on my sister's behalf, deflecting questions about the lake house. It was a difficult decision, I'd say. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Dinner was in the grand ballroom, with elaborate centerpieces of orchids and roses. Wagyu beef, butter-poached lobster, gold-flaked desserts. A 10-piece band, professional dancers. During the toasts, my father stood. To my beautiful daughter Hannah and her wonderful new husband, James. Your mother and I could not be prouder. We have spared no expense to make this day perfect for you, because you deserve nothing but the best. The crowd applauded. I took a long sip of champagne, avoiding having to smile. Hannah's maid of honor gave a touching speech. James's best man shared anecdotes. Then, Hannah herself stood up, slightly tipsy. I just want to thank everyone who made this day possible, she slurred, her voice thick with emotion. My amazing parents, who gave me everything I ever wanted. My wonderful new husband, who I love more than anything. And my sister Audrey, who made the biggest sacrifice of all. She turned to me. I know how much that lake house meant to you. And the fact that you were willing to let it go for my special day means more than I can say. The room erupted in applause. Dozens of eyes turned to me, expecting a response. I raised my glass slightly, nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the evening progressed, the alcohol flowed, the dance floor filled. The cake cutting, first dance, father-daughter dance, all unfolded according to plan. I remained on the periphery, observing it all with detached interest, like an anthropologist studying an unfamiliar culture's rituals. Around midnight, my parents cornered me near the dessert table. You've been quiet all day, my mother said, her words slightly slurred. Aren't you having a good time? It's a beautiful wedding, I replied neutrally. The best money could buy, my father said with a wink. Or the best lake house could buy, I should say. He laughed at his own joke. We never properly thanked you, my mother added, squeezing my arm. For understanding about the house. It really was the only way to give Hannah the wedding she deserved. I looked at them, these two people who had raised me, who had just admitted to stealing from me as casually as commenting on the weather. A strange calm settled over me. You should check your mail tomorrow, I said, with a slight smile. My father frowned. What? Why? Just some information I think you'll find interesting, I said. Enjoy the rest of the evening. I walked away, leaving them looking confused. It was the only moment of satisfaction I had felt all day. The wedding concluded with a grand sparkler send-off as Hannah and James departed for their 3-week honeymoon in a vintage Bentley. Guests tossed rose petals, cheered. My parents stood arm in arm, exhausted but triumphant. I returned to my apartment and sent a text to Stephanie, wedding complete. Proceed as planned tomorrow. The next morning, precisely at 9 a.m., a courier delivered the legal package to my parents' home. It contained documentation of the forgery, statements from witnesses, bank records showing the transfer of funds, and legal notices of the actions being taken to reverse the sale and investigate the fraud. Simultaneously, I sent my letter via email to both my parents. At 9:01, my phone began ringing. First my father, then my mother, then back to my father. I let each call go to voicemail. At 9:30, the text started. What is this, Audrey? Call us immediately. My father. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Please answer your phone. My mother. You can't do this to us. To your sister. We need to talk. My father again. I didn't respond to any of them. By noon, other family members began calling. Apparently my parents had started reaching out for support. My phone buzzed constantly with messages expressing confusion, shock, and in some cases, outrage on my behalf. At 1 p.m., I received a call from an unknown international number. It was Hannah, calling from her honeymoon. What the hell, Audrey? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. They said you're suing them on the day after my wedding. How could you be so selfish? Did they tell you why I'm suing them? I asked calmly. Something about the lake house. They said you changed your mind about helping with the wedding and now you're being vindictive. Hannah, they forged my signature and sold my house without my permission. They stole from me to pay for your wedding. Did you know about it? There was a long pause. I knew they were using money from the lake house sale, she finally said, her voice smaller. But they told me you had agreed to it, that you were doing it as a wedding gift. And you believed that? That I would give up my inheritance from Grandpa Jack for your one-day celebration. It's not just one day, she protested weakly. It's my marriage, my future with James. Your marriage and future with James have nothing to do with stealing my property, I said. If you knew nothing about the forgery, then my issue isn't with you. But if you were complicit in any way, there will be consequences for that too. Hannah started crying. You're ruining everything. We're going to have to come home early now. James is furious. I'm sorry your honeymoon is being interrupted, I said, not feeling sorry at all. But this is a situation of Mom and Dad's making, not mine. After hanging up, I turned off my phone. I needed space from the barrage of family drama. I called Stephanie from my landline for an update. Your parents contacted my office, she reported. They're asking for a meeting, saying they want to resolve this, as a family, without legal involvement. Too late for that, I said. What about the Petersons? They're understandably upset. I've explained the situation, and they're cooperating with the process to unwind the sale. They'll be seeking damages from your parents, but they're not blaming you. By evening, I turned my phone back on to find dozens of missed calls and messages. Most notably, a text from my father, family emergency meeting tomorrow at our house. 2 p.m. Please come. We need to fix this. I consulted with Stephanie and Martin. Both advised me not to meet with my parents alone. We agreed Stephanie would accompany me as my legal representation. When we arrived at my parents' house the next day, I was surprised to find not just my parents, but also Hannah and James, apparently back early from their honeymoon, my father's brother, Uncle Steve, and my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia. Clearly, my parents had called in reinforcements. My father looked shocked when I walked in with Stephanie. Who is this? We said family only. This is Stephanie Miller, my attorney, I said. She goes wherever I go for discussions about this matter. We don't need lawyers for a family discussion, my mother protested. This stopped being just a family discussion when you committed fraud, I replied. The room fell uncomfortably silent. Hannah sat on the couch, looking pale and tired, still in travel clothes. James stood behind her, his face tight with anger. Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia exchanged uneasy glances. My father tried a different approach. Audrey, honey, we know you're upset. There was a misunderstanding about the lake house. We thought we had your implicit consent. Implicit consent. I repeated, my voice rising slightly. You forged my signature on legal documents. You sold property that didn't belong to you. You took hundreds of thousands of dollars that weren't yours to take. Which part of that was a misunderstanding? We were going to pay you back, my mother said weakly. With what money? When? Was there a plan, or were you just hoping I wouldn't find out until it was too late? No one answered. I opened my laptop and connected it to their television. Let me show you exactly what happened, so there's no more room for misunderstandings. Over the next 30 minutes, I presented the evidence Stephanie and I had compiled, the forged documents with my fake signature, bank records directly correlating transfers with wedding expenses, a timeline of deliberate deception, Dorothy Matthews' statement, proof the notary stamp was fraudulently used. When I finished, the room was deathly quiet. Hannah was openly crying. James looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My aunt and uncle appeared horrified. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked my parents, my voice cutting through the silence. Not just legally, but to our family, to our relationship. You stole from me. You violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. For what? So Hannah could have gold flakes on her wedding cake. My father finally spoke, his voice subdued. We made a terrible mistake. We got caught up in giving Hannah the wedding she wanted. We told ourselves we'd figure out how to make it right with you later. By creating a false narrative where I had agreed to sell. By gaslighting me and lying to the entire family. We panicked, my mother admitted. Once we started down this path, we didn't know how to stop. Hannah looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. I didn't know they forged your signature, Audrey. I swear. They told me you had agreed to help with the wedding by selling the lake house. I thought it was incredibly generous, but not impossible. You've always been the responsible one, the one who makes sacrifices. The last sentence hung in the air, unintentionally revealing the twisted family dynamic that had made this situation possible. I had always been expected to sacrifice for Hannah. This was just the most extreme version of a pattern established long ago. What happens now? My father asked, looking at Stephanie. That depends partly on Audrey, she replied. The legal process to unwind the fraudulent sale is already underway. The Petersons will need to be compensated for their troubles. There will be financial penalties and legal fees. As for criminal charges, that will be up to the district attorney, though Audrey's wishes will carry significant weight. All eyes turned to me. I want my house back, I said firmly. I want every penny that was taken from me returned, plus interest and damages. I want a public acknowledgement of what you did and an apology to everyone you lied to about this. And I want you both to get counseling to understand why you thought this was acceptable. My parents nodded mutely. As for criminal charges, I continued, I don't want to see you in jail, but that may not be entirely up to me. What you did was a crime, and there may be consequences beyond what I can control. Uncle Steve cleared his throat. I had no idea any of this was happening. Tom, Elizabeth, what were you thinking? This is your daughter, your own child. We always favored Hannah, my mother said quietly. We never meant to, but we did. She needed more, demanded more, and we responded to that. Audrey was always so capable, so self-sufficient. We took her for granted. That's not an excuse for theft, I said. No, it's not, my father agreed. Nothing excuses what we did. We betrayed you, Audrey. We violated your trust, and we are so sorry. Their apology felt both genuine and wholly inadequate. The damage was done. Trust, once broken at such a fundamental level, couldn't be easily repaired. We'll do whatever it takes to make this right, my mother added. I looked around the room at my family, seeing them with new clarity. The parents who had always prioritized Hannah's wants over my needs. The sister who had benefited from this dynamic her entire life. The extended family who had observed but never intervened. Making this right will take time, I said finally. And things will never be the same between us. That's the real cost of what you did. As Stephanie and I left the house, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I had stood up for myself, but at what cost? The family I had known was irreparably changed. Yet somehow, I also felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been set down. The legal aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months. The sale of the lake house was invalidated. The court ruled that the forged documents could not transfer legal ownership. The Petersons, understandably upset, settled for a compensation package that included all their moving expenses, legal fees, and additional damages. My parents liquidated investments and took out a home equity loan to repay me the full value of the property, plus interest and damages. They narrowly avoided criminal charges after the district attorney agreed to a deal that included community service, financial restitution, and mandatory counseling. The lake house returned to my possession, though not without emotional complications. The first time I visited after regaining ownership, I sat on the dock for hours, reconnecting with the property, processing everything. The space felt different, somehow tainted by the betrayal, yet still fundamentally mine. I spent that summer restoring it, both physically and spiritually. I replaced the locks, installed a security system, repainted walls, refinished floors, and updated the kitchen. Each improvement felt like reclaiming the space, making it mine again. My relationship with my family entered a new phase. Hannah and I spoke infrequently. At first, our conversations were awkward and strained. She had returned most of her wedding gifts after learning the full truth. Though she and James remained married, their honeymoon had been cut short, and the fairy tale beginning to their marriage had been irreparably tarnished. During one of our rare phone calls, Hannah finally asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. Would you have helped with the wedding if they had asked you directly? Would you have sold the lake house voluntarily? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. The lake house was never mine to give away for a wedding. It was Grandpa Jack's legacy, his life's work. He entrusted it to me specifically because he knew I valued it for what it was, not what it could be converted into. I might have contributed some money to your wedding, but the house was never an option. Hannah was quiet for a moment. I think I always knew that, she admitted. Maybe that's why I never questioned their story too deeply. It was easier to believe you had agreed than to face the truth. My parents and I established a careful distance. We spoke monthly, met occasionally for brief meals, but the easy familiarity was gone. They continued with their counseling, gradually coming to terms with the damage they had caused and the patterns that had led to their actions. We always thought we were doing what was best for both of you, my mother said during one difficult conversation. Hannah seemed to need more support, more attention, more resources. You were so capable, so independent. We told ourselves it balanced out somehow. It never balanced, I replied. You took my independence as permission to give everything to Hannah. Being self-sufficient became a punishment. My father nodded slowly. We see that now. We failed you, Audrey. Not just with the lake house, but throughout your life. We took your strength for granted instead of nurturing it. These conversations were painful but necessary. They represented the first honest exchanges we had ever had about the family dynamic that had shaped all our lives. 6 months after the wedding, I held a small gathering at the restored lake house. I invited close friends who had supported me, as well as a few extended family members who had reached out with genuine concern. My parents and Hannah were not invited, a boundary that felt necessary for my healing. As we sat around the fire pit that Grandpa Jack had built, watching the sunset over the lake, my friend Sophia raised her glass. To Audrey, who taught us all that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. The simple toast brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had accepted the narrative that putting my own needs first was somehow wrong. That sacrifice was my designated role in the family. Breaking that pattern had been painful, but essential. The lake house became my sanctuary in a new way. I began spending one weekend a month there, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I established new traditions, new memories. I planted a garden that bloomed in spring, built a reading nook in the sunroom, and learned to sail on Grandpa Jack's old boat that I had carefully restored. A year after the wedding, Hannah and James welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Emma. The birth created an opportunity for cautious reconciliation. I visited them in the hospital, holding my tiny niece, feeling the complicated emotions of family bonds that persist despite deep wounds. I want her to know her aunt, Hannah said, watching me rock the baby. I want her to know the lake house and Grandpa Jack's legacy. I want things to be different for her than they were for us. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I had received from my sister, an acknowledgement that the patterns needed to change for the next generation. 2 years after the wedding, I invited my parents to the lake house for the first time since the incident. It was a brief visit, just an afternoon, but an important step. They walked through the renovated space with visible emotion, noting the changes I had made while respecting the original character of the home. Jack would be proud of what you've done here, my father said quietly, running his hand along the original woodwork. He always said you understood the value of this place in a way the rest of us never did. My mother paused by the framed photo of Grandpa Jack that I had placed prominently in the living room. We lost sight of what matters, she said. We got caught up in appearances, in Hannah's demands, in our own insecurities as parents. We forgot that some things are worth more than money can measure. Their visit was neither a full reconciliation nor a complete forgiveness, but rather an acknowledgement that healing is a process, not an event. Some trust might eventually be rebuilt, but our relationship would never return to what it was before. Perhaps that was for the best. The most important lesson I learned through this ordeal was about the nature of boundaries. For years, I had allowed my family to take advantage of my independence and resilience. I had accepted less while Hannah received more, telling myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their support or approval. But in doing so, I had enabled the very dynamic that ultimately led to the theft of my inheritance. Standing up for myself wasn't just about reclaiming the lake house. It was about reclaiming my place in the family narrative. It was about saying clearly, I matter. My needs matter. My inheritance matters. My boundaries matter. 3 years after the wedding, I stood on the dock at sunset, watching the light play across the water. The lake house was fully mine again, in every sense. I had defended it, reclaimed it, restored it, and made new memories within its walls. Grandpa Jack's legacy continued, not just in the physical structure, but in the strength he had seen in me long before I recognized it in myself. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed important boundaries? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most important relationships we need to honor are the ones with ourselves.